What's good, everyone? Welcome to One Foot Down, a college fantasy football podcast on the Fantasy in Frames Podcast Network. I'm your host, Chris, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Mike Haas. Week 1 is here, and tonight we will be giving you our plays and fades. Heading into the week, we will be breaking down week 0 and giving you some early waiver pickups to think about before you head into week 1. Don't forget the chat is always open. So if you have a waiver question, trade question, or start sit question, don't be afraid to drop it in the chat. We will answer it live on the air. Mike, let's get it popping.
Welcome, football fanatics, to the One Foot Down podcast on the Fantasy in Frames Network. Your gridiron guides, Chris and Mike, are geared up to lead you through the thrilling world of college fantasy football. Whether we're diving into Power 5 giants or uncovering hidden gems, brace yourselves for expert insights, analysis, and daring predictions. Stay in the game. Subscribe, rate, and review. This is your 2024 source for college fantasy football dominance. Let the fantasy frenzy begin.
Mike, we finally made it. We made it to week 0. Week 1 is here. Start your lineup. Start your engines. We are ready to go. Jamie's in the chat. What's up, Jamie? Thanks for tuning in, man. We are looking forward to this episode of One Foot Down, our first in-season episode, ready to give you some of the players that we are playing and fading across the college fantasy football landscape. Mike, we had week 0, 4 games were in the books, all the dogs covered. We had upset with Georgia Tech and FSU. We had Hawaii beat out Delaware State. Nevada come oh so close to beating SMU as double-digit dogs. And then New Mexico losing to Montana State in a big upset there. One of the biggest upsets, the game that popped the lid off the college football season, Georgia Tech versus FSU. Georgia Tech coming out on top 24-21, Michael.
Late field goal.
Yeah, that's what's going to do it. It was a fast game in the amount of time it took to finish the game, but it was a very slow-paced game. The drives were long, the possessions were long, but for fantasy purposes, Mike, is anyone on Florida State rosterable at this point, or are you dropping every Seminole that you have on your roster?
Wow. I mean, it is kind of a shocker for us, right, on that week 0 to do that. But, when you passed along your little script here for tonight, my co-host here, Chris, likes to give us a little rundown of what's going on for the show. And so I'm going through things and preparing, and I'm thinking, you know what? I don't know if I would roster too many on Florida State now. Like, I like Roydell Williams, we mentioned, so I kept recalling. We've talked about him earlier in some episodes, and I do think he'll get enough, on short yardage and stuff like that. But even that being said, is he going to go on a big high point run to get you the fantasy points you need? Not sure. And we talked about the question marks. I was recalling Malik Benson and Morlock and everybody. I'm like, right now, that might be one. Give it a one-off. Be patient a little bit, but yet put that on the back burner to go, okay, if a pattern develops, as we often talk, for 1 week turns to 2 or 3. I don't know if too many will be rosterable if there's a pattern that develops there, which is a shame because FSU, as we know, that would be, a shame for some of us fantasy.
Yeah, and they got Boston College this week. Also, they are double point favorites. But if they're not pushing the ball downfield, I'm not really looking to roster any of these Florida State guys. I was a big Malik Benson guy coming in to the season just because of the value that we were able to get him at and the skill set that he has. But he's going to need to see somewhere between 10 to 12 targets in order to be a viable fantasy asset week in and week out. Will he see that passing volume? Probably not. You're going to be pulling your hair out trying to decide when to put any of these guys in your lineup. So Malik Benson, Kyle Morlock only saw 2 targets. Granted, Georgia Tech made the right adjustments in the game. They were forcing Florida State to throw the ball downfield once they adjusted to the short passing attack that Florida State was giving them. So at this point, for me, I'm not looking to acquire or roster much of these guys. If there's a guy maybe I'm holding on to, Malik Benson for another week or two. Roydell Williams, maybe another guy I want to roster. Cam Davis, the true freshman, almost had that one screen pass where he would have been gone off for a big play. Maybe that was a game-changing play for them there, but who knows? But again, not much left to be desired out of FSU. The 3 attempts that DJU did make past 20 yards, he just didn't complete. So not great at all for FSU. On the other hand, Georgia Tech, we kind of faded a little bit because of the schedule,
right?
Who they were going up against. They went up against a ranked opponent, and FSU came out and put up some decent points. Granted, Haynes King didn't have the greatest outing for fantasy purposes.
Low completion.
He played a solid game. I think he only put up 11.67 fantasy points. They brought in the backup QB for the goal line rush, which is not good when you roster a quarterback that you were expecting to run. Was any of the Georgia Tech fade? I know it's only been one week or 0 weeks. Was any of the Georgia Tech fade to you warranted, Mike?
Well, we know, so they won the game, as you just said. So I'll step back one moment on Florida State. You got Boston College. You could play similar and can also play tough defense, scrappy, come at you. Play. They may not. We talked about them. They may not win, a whole lot of games, but they're really usually never really out of a lot of games. And if they're going to dictate the game, that's what came to me as you said that, like Georgia Tech did. The fade on there, like I had high hopes for Singleton, and that could just be Florida State typically has pretty solid secondary. So I mean, you can't put, but if you're hoping for those numbers, this showed us matchups will mean everything on teams that have the schematic and the high recruit on certain sides of the ball and the traditions of that. Florida State does. So that didn't lose them the game. Both teams were hanging around. So Jamal Haynes is the only one, that really came out and he's improving. So I have him in a number of leagues. So I'm hopeful, but I mean, that's just the 1 week because it'll script to go to those receivers the next week. And, when they play a better matchup than it was against FSUD. So the fades on those receivers would hurt starting in best ball. That's what came to me at Florida State. That's the leagues that are going to hurt us as we're starting. We can't change trade or make lineup adjustments only in certain leagues. So
the passing volume wasn't great for Haynes King versus FSU, but he's got some cake games in his schedule that's going to make him a viable fantasy option in the future. So although he didn't get the point output that we wanted for fantasy managers, luckily week 0 didn't really count for us. So hopefully he can go in. He's got Georgia State next, so hopefully he can go in, play Georgia State, give us a good outing. My biggest worry is I want to see what they do with the position once they get to the goal line. If they continue to bring Pyron on, his value just completely drops for me.
Right.
Because you want him to be in those situations to score. So some of the top performers from week 0, one from each position. Mike mentioned Jamal Haynes, 11 carries, 75 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 receptions, 16 yards. He went off for 22.1 fantasy points. He was the overall running back one on the week. The top quarterback producer, Braden Schrager from Hawaii, 17 completions, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns, rushed the ball 10 times for 38 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Good enough for 31.92 fantasy points. The kid had a day. The top wide receiver, Cortez Braun from Nevada, 4 for 66 and 1 touchdown, 14.6 fantasy points. And the tight end of week 0, the guy who put SMU on his back, said, get on, let's go for a ride.
Love that.
Us. RJ Maryland, 8 receptions, 162 yards, and 1 touchdowns, 26.2 fantasy points. Mike, is RJ Maryland a buy or a sell coming off what might be his best game of the season?
Yeah, we talked about him during those tight end rankings. I was thinking, where's those rankings? We each had him in there somewhere, probably at least I bet top 15. I'm thinking, could be wrong.
I hope so now.
But then we had interesting that he had a good year last year too. So if this is something, what came to me there was all of us who drafted him and in the different formats drafting him, and then week 0 doesn't count for anything. So we're all going to put him in our lineup. We're going to think it's in the bank, and then the matchup again. So it's interesting, as we talked off air, Chris, on how in college it does take a little more work to put in on the matchups and how many games, and then trying to sift through which are the ones from your draft team to put in. So it's like a double fold thing, a lot different than the pro game in there, because there's a lot less options too. Your bet. So this, you have to really keep up to date and go with a little bit more, like you said, and dig a little deeper possibly as to who they're playing. And the scheme from the opposing defense keeps coming through in my mind over and over again now, of really placing on how they do it. Do they blitz more? Do they not more? And taking into account for some of these certain players. One week they go off, the next week you could have, they got great cover DB, tight end might not be in the script. It's a tough thing to predict, but yet delve in a little bit, see if you can come up if you have other good tight ends. But college is going to be pretty difficult for that.
I think Maryland set himself up to be the potential first target, first read for this offense. And if you look at SMU's schedule heading in to the rest of the season, they got Houston Christian next, where they're big time favorites. I think as of right now, 61 point favorites against Houston Christian. Then they got BYU, double digit favorites again. TCU, single digit favorites. The only 2 games where they are dogs are the next 2, Florida State and Louisville. The rest of the way, they're favorites across the board. And then only one of those games are they single digit favorites. So pretty much across the board, SMU are double-digit favorites in all the games they play. Granted, a lot of that could change as the season goes on, but as of right now, RJ Maryland, if you're going to try to buy him, you're going to be paying the 162-yard premium that he just put up in week 0. So you could probably get a pretty penny if you're selling RJ Maryland. But the fact of the matter is, the landscape at tight end for college fantasy football can be a little barren at times. There can be a kind of group of players that are all kind of the same guy. If you can get a player like RJ Maryland that's going to position himself to be that potential tight end 1 week in and week out by being that first option in SMU's pass attack, RJ Maryland, man, that's a guy that you want to hold. You are holding RJ Maryland going into the rest of the year, because there's not going to be too many other tight ends that are going to give you that positional advantage and give you games like he can, like he did.
And the only way I would trade him as well is if you were short at another position, wide receiver, this and that, something. But you're going to have.
But you'd have to be really short at that point, right?
You would. You'd have to be
the amount of players, even on waivers, especially early in the year. You're going to be able to, if you're aggressive on the waivers early, you're going to be able to end up. Yeah, you're going to be able to end up with some quality producing wide receivers for CFF, and some of those guys are in our waiver ads heading into week 1. If any of these guys are on your waivers, you want to think about potentially picking these guys up. Wide receiver out of New Mexico, Luke Wysong, 7 targets, 6 receptions, 95 yards, is the go-to guy for Devin Dampier. If Dampier's on your waiver wire, you might want to consider picking him up as well. A wide receiver from Hawaii, DeKel Crotis, 5 targets, 3 receptions, 49 yards, and a touchdowns. If McBride does miss significant time, which we are all projecting McBride to miss significant time, Crotis could end up being that wide receiver 2 for Hawaii. We saw Ashlock have a great day this past weekend, and Crotis, I believe, was just behind him. Running back, wide receiver, hybrid out of SMU, Brashard Smith did only see the 12 touches out of the backfield, but was the most explosive running back on the team, 71 yards and a touchdown. And then finally, running back out of New Mexico, Eli Sanders, 17 totes, 78 yards, 7 missed forced tackles, the most out of all running backs throughout week 0. So potential bell cow work there with the 17 carries for New Mexico. They did have to play a little bit of catch-up ball, so that might be why his numbers are a little lower. But look for Eli Sanders or Luke Wysong or DeKel Crotis or Brashard Smith on your waiver wires heading in to week 1. Michael, we have our matchup of the week. This one's a doozy, brother. The Bayou versus the Beach. LSU versus USC. Miller Moss versus Garrett Nussmeier. The LSU wide receiver room versus the USC wide receiver room.
Oh,
I think the over
that question
right now
I made no time going. When you compare those rooms, Chris? You're like
some stout rooms.
Oh,
I mean, Chris Hilton, I don't think is expected to play his game time decision, but Kyron Lacey, CJ Daniels, Chris Hilton on one side. Then on USC, you got Zachariah Branch, Makai Lemon, Deuce Robinson. Yeah, I mean, it's 2 stout rooms. The over-under, I believe, right now is set to 66 or 68. So even Vegas is expecting both these teams to put up quite a bit of points. Is in
neutral
Las
site.
Vegas, neutral site. So
I think there will be. I think it'll go up there.
Night game,
it'll go up there.
I'm looking forward to this. Out of all the matchups throughout this week, and there are great matchups throughout this week. LSU versus USC, at least for fantasy purposes.
Oh yeah, you can do the LSU stack. Chris will work this week. The LSU stack if you got it. Like even with Taylor tight end, you could potentially all 3 QB, wide receiver, tight end. Like it won't always work. We talked about that earlier, but as you talk about that it works for that particular matchup, especially in the call with a deep. Because I think it will be. I think it's a given. This game's a shootout. A given. The last time they met. Like
almost has to be. I mean, if USC did get rid of Alex Grinch, their horrible defensive coordinator, so maybe they start doing things a little bit better on that side of the ball. But I'm expecting both teams offensively to be able to put up quite a bit of numbers. There is Florida versus Miami, which has the potential to be a big game as well. Seeing Cam Ward on his new team playing in Florida. Florida, especially against Miami, is going to be loud. They're going to be raucous. I want to see how he reacts in those kind of
couple injuries in that game too,
There is, yes.
Kobe Young, Montrell Johnson, I don't know if they're for certain out. I think Montrell might be for certain. We'd have to look into that one. But those injuries that are it led me to believe today, looking in a few, whenever you look in on certain sites, when it's the day-to-day in college, it can be a tough gig. And you need right up to games. It can be the worst. And they put in there, it doesn't say much. It's and then you have a little injury flag that's only half a flag, and then what does that mean? And then they end up playing, or they're pulled because of So
make sure you have your auto subs set. If your league use auto subs, make sure you have your auto subs set now before game week, so you don't have to run into any of those.
On Montrell, Kobe, there's different guys in that game, so that came true. I'm sure there are in other games, but they come to mind because I drafted them. So, but looking through the leagues, yeah, that'll be the one thing that gets adventurous with college fantasy.
Yeah. It's always the weekly start sit. You're always trying to find the information of who's going to go, and because there's so many times where these teams would dress these star players just to be a decoy, run out there in the field for warm-ups, and then they come out in their street clothes and then absolutely don't play at all. Yeah. So to finish off week one, it's Boston College, like we mentioned earlier, versus Florida State on the Monday, 7:30 p.m. prime time Labor Day Classic. I am looking forward to the full slate of college football this weekend, man. We got a question, Mike.
Oh, here we go.
Are you guys covering college DFS? Curious or week one stuff from Out of Rhythm Fantasy Sports? We don't do any DFS stuff, just weekly head-to-head college fantasy. If you got any questions, feel free to shoot. We'll answer to the best that we can. We just don't have access to DFS where we live, so we cannot play the game as much as I would love to get into college DFS. It's just they won't let me do it, man. They just won't let me do it. The damn governments, man.
I know. I've done some in the NFL a few years back, and then when we got our what we do,
once they made it illegal, they took away all the good stuff, man,
from us. It's like.
Rob Peter better when it was illegal.
Yeah,
like
Rob Peter to pay Paul. Like, what would you just do to me? Because I used to enjoy playing
so much better when I made it in my bathtub.
And I like that. I like that drafting. But could you imagine the drafting in the college versus I've done some in when it was pro? Can you imagine the drafting and the pricing in the
sure.
Oh my goodness. So it'd be interesting.
I think they only keep it to like Power 4.
Okay,
I don't know how deep they get it.
Yeah,
I know Underdog picked up the best ball tournaments, the college fantasy football best ball tournaments, and it's just Power 4, I believe.
Okay,
I don't think
makes sense to me.
It's the G5 too much and stuff like that because of how expensive it can get. But soon enough, man. Soon enough, that stuff's gonna come. But just seeing Underdog pick it up was terrific. So, Mike. Let's get into why we're here, brother. Let's get into our plays and fades heading into week one. The thing with week one for us, before we hop into it, I was curious what you were covering. Correct. Yes. I was with FFRPG last week talking Big Ten. We talked the Big Ten and the potential fantasy assets coming out for the rookie drafts next year. Yeah, make sure if you haven't checked that out, make sure you go check that out. Mike Cash and Evan are absolute gems. They know ball with the best of them. Mike, week one plays and fades. We are here. We're going to talk. The thing with week one, and we talked about this a little earlier, was there's so much FBS versus FCS teams. It's kind of hard to pinpoint a player at the top of a rankings list to be like, yeah, this guy's going to have a bad day. And then be like, yeah, he's going to have a bad day, but he's playing an FCS team, which is completely out of their league. He's going to go in and he's going to dominate. So we really had to do our homework this week to make sure we are bringing the listeners and the viewers some great information heading into week one with their lineups. My QB fade or QB play of okay, perfect. Oh, there you go. Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, that was the big room. We had the big room rookie draft. Bunch of dudes on that. Terrific, man. Good stuff. Thanks for tuning in, brother. QB play, college fantasy, week one for me. New Mexico quarterback Devin Dampier. Talked about him early versus Arizona. He's going to be one of the top waiver ads at the position. 69 completion percentage against Montana State. The passing volume wasn't great for Devin Dampier against an FCS opponent. It's 26 attempts, but he was decent at moving the ball downfield. He had 4 rush attempts for 35 yards, greatly propped up by a 24-yard scamper. He had the rush TD, which kind of helped his performance as a fantasy producer. Last season, he finished with 56 attempts on the ground. So rushing attack will be a part of his game. Arizona has 3 transfers across the defensive line. They've always been a kind of good rush defense team Arizona has, but against the pass, they are not that great. They are lower rated defense heading into the year. Last season, opponents averaged 244 passing yards against the Wildcats last year. Now, Devin Dampier is going to come into Arizona losing to Montana State. He's going to maybe have a little bit of a chip on his shoulders, looking to produce in his second game of the year. Mike, are you okay starting a guy like Devin Dampier who lost against an FCS opponent going up against a team like Arizona?
Yeah, as your Arizona typically has good offense, an offense runs fast-paced offense, high tempo themselves, like to put points on the board. So that's one advantage for Dampier to keep up with them. I think it'll be a high-scoring game that way. But as you just spoke of a little bit, there'll be pressure on him. We talked about this. It's just the recurring theme I can have from our episodes that set the table through January, February, March when we were doing drafts. It's all coming back now, where if you have a deeper bench, I would only play him if your bench wasn't that deep. Then I would maybe try if you have, the flex spot or the format of your league. If you have what you feel is more consistent or more to go on. So a junior quarterback, for say, that you have somebody, Neusmeyer or whatever, like somebody that has had more reps, you might want to go that route. But he's definitely that up and coming quarterback. And if you have the right matchup and the right points, as we talked, try to pick the games where the point total is up there on both sides, and maybe both sides will take advantage of that and then outscore some of those QBs that might be higher in a different matchup. So again, I know that's a boring answer of the matchup predictor we're talking about, but it's everything when you have these deep lineups. And it could be, but it's a bonus, as you just said, if you go ahead and start him, it can help you win a week as well. So if you can hit right on that, right, then that can help you also win a week. So that's the joy of drafting your own teams and having those play like that hunch on a guy to make the difference. But I would only do it if you're not as deep of a bench at that position, if that makes sense. I have him on several that I draft. So
yeah. Jack Rabbits at OSU will be my watch this week. Oklahoma, we're expecting Ollie Gordon to put on a show against SDSU. He was putting on a show
could get 5
last year. We're expecting him to do the same. We appreciate you subbing to the channel. And he says, DM me. I have some college fantasy spots to fill if you guys want. So there you go, Mike. I know you don't have enough in your portfolio. You want to add some more. Make sure you hit up Out of Rhythm Fantasy Sports to get you in a college. I think I might have to hit them up, Mike. Well, I think I might have to get in one more.
I've been itching this week. I have clear this week. I've been,
Is that your
do one at the final, just before, like when the real heat is on, right? How many drafts? We got to do a poll, like right the night before.
The depth chart draft, because it is depth chart season for college fantasy. The or season.
Hours before game one on Thursday night at 7 or whatever, right?
Yeah. All right. I got a fade, but before I get into my fade, Mike, you want to touch on a maybe QB play that you might want to you're high on this week?
Oh yeah, just a few names that I thought I'd add. Maybe we won't go as in depth on certain things tonight, but one quarterback we talked about, Ethan Vasco for Coastal Carolina. I like he's kind of upside. And he's kind of in the same conversation a little bit like Dampier. He's a little bit more experienced. We have a little bit of viewing from him last year. Nice player, and different player McCall and different players moved on. So when you're replacing somebody, but you're also familiar with that offense, that's why I like him. Totally familiar, comfortable. Seen him, rushes out, can hand off or run or do a number of things. He's interesting. And Jacob Zeno is who you had mentioned one time back, and I started reading up on him. He has totally improved and turned his college career around there at UAD. So now I'm not as up on all those wide receivers you're mentioning. One, he's down list. We know him, but it'll be interesting. Part of college is what we hit up at the start of the show. we need these first few weeks to see some of these secondary tier players and wide receivers who's going to be the number one, who's not, when they're giving them all an opportunity, and who meshes well. So that's the question mark, say, with Zeno. Who are some of these guys going to mesh with? But their athleticism and quality and height and ability and dual threats, that, those are the type of guys we want early, that we don't want to be, because you'll miss them on the waiver wire. You better have them now, get them as soon as you can, and then sit with those guys like that.
Yeah,
would be great.
That's like Zeno, Mateer from Wash State, when he was named the starter. He might be on your waivers. He might be a guy that you want to go acquire. My QB fade heading into week 1, though, big name in the football streets, Carson Beck from Georgia. And I'm fading Carson Beck this week. Comes down to solely the matchup versus Clemson. I think he will hit a good amount of yardage. I just don't see the touchdowns coming behind it. So he could hit 275, possibility of 3, but I don't see him putting up a 2-touchdown game through the air. He's going up against Clemson, which, look, top 15 ranked defense coming into the year. Last year, they ranked in the 80s when it came to pass attempts per game by opposing
this game
teams.
Is getting me excited.
Clemson, Georgia is going to be a great one. Clemson, Georgia is going to be a great one.
Well, what was last year 10-3? Or the year before?
Yeah, no, I don't think they played last year.
Yeah, last year. So, but the last game, so whatever year, it was 10-3.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if there's weather involved, if we're going to dig that deep, but sometimes Clemson has, there's been certain weather, or we'd have to dig deep on that. But 10-3, I was thinking, oh man, and that's when the quality of players, on the field. So, familiar.
I'm looking for Beck to have like a decent game through the air, but when it comes to fantasy points, I don't see him having a great day. Quarterbacks last year only averaged 182 passing yards against versus Clemson. They did lose Nate Wiggins to the NFL, but they got a lot of returning production back on that defense. They were first in EPA per pass against opposing defenses against opposing offenses last year. So I'm expecting some in the same from Clemson and what they're going to be able to do on the other side of the ball. They did not touch the transfer portal, so everything is from within from Clemson. And Georgia just doesn't have the world beaters at the position like they had last year. No Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey's gone. Ben Urosek there, Oscar Delpa at tight end now. There are some guys on that side of the ball, but for fantasy purposes, I think I'm okay if I want to pivot away from Carson Beck this week. I'm in Dakota, so FCS national champs. Yeah, love it, man. Beck is a better football player than he is. I agree with that.
And we're as we talked about at length, there's another player. My fate is not that we're good. So as we've went through this, that's a difficult thing. We could name a few like Leonard, Sanders, that. We've talked about them, and that's absolute truth in that. Now, the beauty of it, if you can hit them when they're on the rise, if they're going to have that career college year, this is it. Like for Beck, Leonard, Shadur, but are they all going to do it? No. Would we all be right? We'd be geniuses, but some of them are going to have to hit for the rest of their, to carry on and move forward. But they also have tough schedules. So when you hear FF Chris talk and lead us through some of these stats, then you have to take that into account that, they could be 10 touchdown passes shorter than, I'm not going to say Ethan Vasco and not run as well. Well, this is fantasy and we want to win at fantasy. So it is a difficult balance to
absolutely.
have. So if you have deep leagues, my plan is hit one of them to play all the time, like a Beck, a Leonard, a Sanders, but then the other two, as at FF Chris and myself like to do, then we like to get some of these other guys dual threat and throw in drones and throw in so then you have yourself covered. So there's a secret we're giving away tonight, that then you cover yourself a little bit, and then if they have that 5-6 down TD game, you've hit both angles at the same time.
Agreed.
But
there it is. Yeah, QB play is Devin Dampier and Jared Zeno. QB fade, Carson Beck and
Riley Leonard.
Riley Leonard. It's over. It's over. Riley Leonard. I mean, he did lose. His O-line's beat up.
Just to start,
he lost Joe Alt, and then the other guy that replaced Joe Alt is out for the year, right? Yeah. So they got a true freshman in there now.
Yeah, I just think so I thought a lot about what you said. It's the exact same reason we talk about Clemson, Georgia, Notre Dame, these teams in the top that play tougher defenses and play tough defense themselves. So you're going to have to, I do think, pick your spots. Even though you might have that quality quarterback, pick your spots for the right matchups. But if you're in a certain one where he may spread it everywhere. So my fear with Riley, why I fade him, his numbers may be okay. He can run okay. Everything may balance its way out and have a good game and win the game. Absolutely. But he may not be the flash and dash that you're hoping for, but he will 4 or 5 games, not the whole skid for the whole year. Because they won't. They'll use everybody. Great. Got a lot of offensive quality guys. Who is it today? I don't know. So this week, I have no idea which one it will be. Away. Could be any of them. Could be any.
Exactly. Agreed.
So for week 1,
All right, let's get into the running backs, Mike. Go ahead.
Running backs, yeah. Oh, we got Phil Maffa on there.
No, I don't. I switched it on you. I switched it over to Jordan Waters, Western. He's playing against. He's my play, Jordan Waters. My play is Jordan Waters.
Okay. Good runner.
NC State playing against Western Carolina. A game set to be dominated by North Carolina State, who are 34-point favorites heading into the week. Waters is a transfer from Duke. He hit career highs last year in yardage, touchdowns, missed tackles, forced, rushes over 10 yards, and rushes over 15 yards. For me, Waters is strictly a volume play. If NC State gets up early with their passing attack, they're just going to be dishing the ball off quite a bit. And Jordan Waters is going to be the main guy that's going to carry the workload for NC State. They had Jordan Houston last year, who only ran for just over 500 yards. They were 48th in team rush play percentage and 68th in yards per attempt last year. So I'm expecting Waters to come in and really carry the load for NC State. We saw them use Concepcion out of the backfield last year because their rushing attack just wasn't doing enough for them. So I'm expecting Waters to go in, play against the Western Carolina Catamounts. They were middle of the pack in defending the run in the FCS last year. So Jordan Waters is a smash play for me heading into week 1. The matchup's good. The volume should be there for him. And they are big-time favorites heading into week 1. My RB fade, Mike, big-time guy, probably going to have me putting my foot in my mouth, is Cal running back Jaden Ott. He's going against UT Martin. UT Martin, I think he's played against. They were one of the top teams in rush defense last year in the FCS. So there is an opportunity for Ott to have a decent day, just not a great day. It was kind of hard to pick a guy at the top of the list that was going to have a bad day, considering some of the matchups were rough or cakewalks this week with the FBS, the FCS, the level of competition not being the greatest between the matchups. So Cal is only favored by 13 points. The over-under is set to 48. The last time these two teams faced, the Golden Bears end up winning 27-13. Where I might get burned, Ott opened up the year last year rushing for 190 yards against North Texas. I am not looking forward to this fade, but if it hits, I'm going to be a pretty happy guy. Sticking my neck out there for this one, just based on what the UT Martin defense or rush defense can do against the rushing attack. And that's pretty much the only reasoning why I'm fading Jaden Ott slightly heading into week 1. Mike, you got any for us, fades or plays, the running back position?
Well, I didn't delve too. It's more with certain teams that we don't know that will share the backfield. So it's like I don't want to just like harp on Notre Dame, but they come to mind because yes, they'll use your Love. Yes, they might use a secondary third back. Will they use a rookie back? Like, so some of the teams we'll know more in a few weeks. So sometimes fade some of these teams that don't have, we've talked before, they have one workhorse, but some might have two, then you're a little bit safer. So I can think of Alabama. I think Jam Miller might be banged up a bit. So then maybe you want to favor, and play an Alabama back because you're going to get those touches. So look at some of the injuries and things like that, and maybe stay away week 1 and 2 on the triple threat backfields. So as a statement as a whole, and there's a few this week until you can see, and I would take yours now here, Phil Maffa, and think I do kind of agree with you. I think he'll have, he could have a great game and only have 75 yards and maybe he scores one. Well, that's not horrible on your team, but we're hoping for more when we have this depth of players in week 1. We're hoping for more to win that week.
Yeah, I was going to put Maffa as my fade, but it was just
once you're talking, he might, and that's a great, if they play, they could win 14-10. He gets a TD and 75 yards. Well, that's a great game for the player and for the teams, but not for our fantasy that we're talking.
Yeah, well, I was looking at Georgia's rush defense. Yeah, I was looking at Georgia's rush defense last year, and they weren't that great against the run, man. They were like 90th in EPA against the rush. So I'm not. What I was like, okay, I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna stick my neck on the line. I'm gonna say, fade Phil Maffa this week, and then I was really diving into it. I was like, you know what, Phil Maffa's a play this week, based on what Georgia's rush defense doesn't do against the rush. So Georgia's pass defense, I got no problems fading Clemson's wide receivers in this matchup, but running back, I think I'm hammering home. Phil Maffa. So let's get into the wide receivers, Mike. My wide receiver play of the week, UAB. You touched on his quarterback there, Jacob Zeno. Amari Thomas. He's going against Alcorn State, fully expecting UAB to toss it around the park and Amari Thomas to be the main benefactor of the passing attack. He was the leading target hog for UAB last season with 67 targets and is attached to a 3,000-yard passer. Everyone is expecting UAB to take a next step up in their passing attack, and there is no reason why they shouldn't start at week 1 against Alcorn State. If you are struggling with some starts, you're looking at some wide receivers that maybe don't have the sexiest matchups. And it's kind of hard to predict this week because of some of the easier matchups. We mentioned that a couple times across the show. So maybe you're stuck. Do I want to start Xavier Restrepo against Florida in Florida? Cam Ward's first game in Florida. He's been inconsistent throughout his career. You don't always know what you're going to get. I'm not saying sit Xavier Restrepo because he's good to see 7 to 10 targets in a game. But if there's a guy that is kind of in that situation where you're torn on, plug Amari Thomas in, man. He shouldn't let you down this week. I think they're double-digit favorites as well. Somewhere in the 30s, I believe, is where the line is set at right now. So another game where Vegas is expecting UAB to put up some big numbers. Yeah, wide receiver fade.
Yep.
Noah Thomas versus.
Totally agree.
Notre Dame, man. Texas A&M wide receiver. Noah Thomas. He's going up against
Noah Thomas.
Yeah, and you know as good as anyone else. Notre Dame's defense is what their strong suit is. They're a top 10 ranked defense. The volume might be there for Noah Thomas in week 1, but I'm going to lean towards the defensive matchup, especially entering an era with a new head coach. Notre Dame has a solid D-line, an all-conference safety, 2 highly rated corners, and a linebacker room that will stop any potential run game.
Great linebacker.
Their defense is stout. They've always been stout. They'll continue to be stout, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be stout. Heading into week 1 against Texas A&M, I'm not expecting a whole lot from Texas A&M's passing offense. I'm thinking Le'Veon Moss is going to see the brunt of what they want to do. Last season, teams were averaging 164.8 passing yards against Notre Dame, while averaging just under 30 attempts per game. The over-under right now, Mike, 46.5 points. The last time these two teams played, 24-3 for A&M.
Yeah,
so,
I wouldn't go over. I was just going to say that.
Yeah,
it's another tough.
It's going to be. It's at Kyle Field, so it's in Texas. But Notre Dame's going to be ready for it, man. Their defense is going to be locked in, especially early in the season. I'm always going to give the edge to the better defensive team in these situations. And right now, that's Notre Dame. I'm expecting Notre Dame's defense to be locked in and ready to go against Texas A&M this week, man.
Right.
So wide receiver plays and fades, Amari Thomas and Noah Thomas, the two Thomases. Mike, you want to get into the tight ends? You got a tight end play for us this week, brother?
There was one I scratched down, Dabney for TCU. There's another game, so that high point.
Drake Dabney, yeah,
and I mean, their focus of that offense usually is fast pace and move the ball and don't, not as long of play calls and running the clock down and control. Not like this Georgia Clemson. We don't know what they're going to do. So, and he's coming off a great year last year, Dabney.
Yeah, he is.
And he'll have opportunity. And so what I did, trying to look at matchups, you gave me homework of these matchups and just trying to find, if there's a poor man's RJ Maryland, but not really that poor. It might be Dabney. So before that's typically, you could see him coming up with some great totals that would match somebody similar skill set there. But I took that because of the high over under, and opportunity will present itself in that game for him. And a fade, one of my favorites would have been Mitch Evans. Again, we keep talking here. I'm having to talk about Notre Dame negatively, but they're going to be good as we carry on. But I think we'll have to be patient with some of these teams, especially the top teams of the P4 that you're saying. Patient with them till we see and things settle. Sounds strange, but yet some of these teams that not all of those teams, if they start with a tough matchup, we have to wait and see. And you've named some that are starting with those tough schedules, so we got to watch and beware a little bit of that. Play some of these secondary matchups that we have to have a better matchup. So you just one that.
Yeah. I love the calls. I love the Drake Dabney call there for TCU. My tight end play of the week is Kansas State tight end Garrett Oakley. I'm expecting him to step into that Ben Sinnott role for that offense. A tight end that maybe went undrafted in some of your CFF drafts, especially early on in the year. But he's a play for me this week against UT Martin. He's playing UT Martin. I mentioned it earlier. Jaden Davis is playing UC Davis, not UT Martin.
Yep.
UC Davis was one of the.
I thought you said LJ Martin for a minute or something. I was
who is expected to start
Martin
this week? He's expected to start this week.
Yeah,
LJ Martin. And then tight end fade is the Georgia tight ends, at least for this week, until we can see who's going to be the guy for that offense and who's going to be the one to roster. So don't play any of the Georgia tight ends at least this week until we get some concrete evidence on who's going to be the guy. Mike, that was a quick 45 minutes, brother. Quick 45 minutes.
Really fast.
Week 1 is here, brother. Week 2 is right around the corner. We are looking forward to the college fantasy football season. We appreciate your support. Make sure you like the stream. You subscribe to the channel. You got one more?
One bold statement. You wanted my bold prediction.
Give me your bold statement for week 1. Go ahead.
Here we have it. They're predicting 6 touchdown victory for Oregon this week. 6 touchdowns. So I said, you know what? The bold statement, Tez Johnson's getting 2, Jordan James is getting 2, and Evan Stewart's getting 2. That's 6.
Ooh.
2, 2, 2, and 6.
Ooh.
Dylan Gabriel spreading it around. All in on Oregon.
All in on Oregon, man.
I don't know. That's what I came up with.
No, I like it. I like it a lot.
I'm all going with the numbers. They said 6.
Go with the numbers, baby.
Going with the numbers.
Six tugs. I love it, man. We appreciate each and every person that tuned in today. We look forward to the college fantasy football season, the college football season, and getting you set up and ready to take down some trophies. Like I mentioned, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us help you, and we appreciate each and every one of you. For Mike at Mike Haas, FF, Mike H, apologies. I'm Chris. And we'll see you week 2.
Next week. It'll go quick.
Welcome, football fanatics, to the 1 Foot Down.